The late afternoon sun, thick and golden, streamed through the tall windows of Graceland, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny lost stars. Clara adjusted the stack of fan mail on her desk, trying to look busy. It was her third week as a junior assistant in Elvis Presley's bustling household, and every day felt like stepping into a dream, or more accurately, a whirlwind. From the moment she'd walked through the gates, she'd been awestruck. The mansion, the endless stream of people, the sheer energy that vibrated to every room. It was exhilarating and a little overwhelming. Her job mostly involved sorting mail, running errands, and generally trying to keep up with the organized chaos that followed the king of rock and roll. She was just a small cog in the giant machine. But she was learning, observing. And one thing she'd observed quite early on was Elvis's peculiar drinking habit. It wasn't the Pepsi itself. Everyone knew Elvis loved his Pepsi. It was the container. He wouldn't touch it unless it was served in a specific type of glass. Not a fancy crystal tumbler, not a modern highball, and certainly not the bottle or a can. It was a rather plain, sturdy glass, slightly fluted towards the bottom with a solid, weighty feel. It looked like something you'd find in an old-fashioned diner, not in the home of the most famous man on earth. Clara had seen it firsthand. Just yesterday, she'd been asked to bring him a Pepsi while he was reviewing song lyrics in the living room. She'd grabbed a clean glass from the kitchen cabinet, a perfectly fine standard issue. Graceland glass. She poured the dark, fizzy liquid, added some ice, and carried it in, feeling a small thrill to be performing such a personal task for the Elvis. He'd taken one look, his brow furrowed slightly, and a quiet sigh escaped him. Clara, thank you," he'd said, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "But this isn't the right glass." Clara's heart had sunk a little. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Presley. I just grabbed one from the cupboard." He'd offered a small, reassuring smile. "No worries, darling. It's just, I need the other one, the sturdy one. You know the kind." She hadn't known the kind then, but she certainly did now. Vernon, Elvis's father, had chuckled, walking in at that moment. Elvis still, with that old superstition, he'd teased, but with affection. Elvis had just shrugged a hint of something unreadable in his eyes. Since then, Clara had paid close attention. Every Pepsi, every single time, came in that specific type of glass. There were maybe half a dozen of them kept separate from the other glassware in the kitchen. They were washed by hand, handled with an almost reverent care by the kitchen staff. Today, Clara watched as one of the maids, Martha, meticulously dried one of the glasses after washing it. It was clear glass, no markings, no fancy designs, just simple, practical, and old-fashioned. "Martha," Clara ventured, trying to sound casual, "those glasses, are they special in some way?" Martha, a kind-faced woman who'd worked for the Presley family for years, paused, holding the glass up to the light. "Special? Well, in a way, I suppose. Elvis just prefers them, always has, ever since he made it big." She offered a small, knowing smile. "Folks got their quirks, you know, and Elvis, bless his heart, he's got a few. This one's harmless. But why these particular ones?" Clara pressed gently. "Are they from somewhere special?" "A gift?" Martha shook her head. "Not that I know of, just some old glasses he likes. Colonel Parker tried to get him to use fancier ones once for a photo shoot, but Elvis wouldn't budge. Said it just didn't taste right otherwise." She chuckled. Imagine that the taste of Pepsi, changing, depending on the glass. Clara tried to imagine it. It made no sense. Pepsi was Pepsi. Why would the king of rock and roll, who had access to anything and everything, cling so fiercely to a few plain, sturdy glasses? It wasn't about status or glamour. It felt personal. Deeply personal. She made a mental note of the glass's precise shape, slightly wider at the rim than the base, a subtle bulge in the middle before tapering again, and a thick, heavy bottom. It felt good in the hand, solid and dependable. Later that evening, after everyone else had left and the mansion was settling into its quiet hum, Clara found herself drawn back to the kitchen. She picked up one of the clean, dry glasses. It was cool to the touch, smooth, unremarkable. She held it, tracing the faint lines of its simple design. It didn't feel like an expensive antique or a sentimental gift. It felt ordinary, and that was the most extraordinary thing of all. Why would something so ordinary hold such sway over a man who lived in anything but ordinary life? It was an odd quirk, as Martha had said, but something about it nagged at Clara. It wasn't just a preference. It seemed almost like a ritual. A silent daily testament to something Clara couldn't yet grasp. She placed the glass back on the shelf, her mind buzzing with unanswered questions. This wasn't just a random celebrity eccentricity, she was sure of it. There was a story here hidden within the clear glass, just waiting to be discovered. And for some reason, Clara felt a growing urge to find out what that story was. It was more than just curiosity. It felt like a quiet invitation to understand a deeper, more human side of the legendary Elvis Presley, a side few people ever got to see. Days turned into a week, and Clara's fascination with the Pepsi glass only grew. She continued her duties, sorting fan mail, answering phones, and running errands, but her eyes were always open, her ears always listening for any clue about the mysterious glasses. She noticed the unspoken rules around them. If Elvis was about to have a Pepsi, someone would automatically reach for those glasses. No one questioned it. It was simply how things were done. The general consensus among the staff was a shrug and a smile, a fond acceptance of Elvis's quirks. "Oh, Elvis and his Pepsi glasses," remarked a seasoned roadie, wiping sweat from his brow after a long session of loading equipment. "Been like that for years. Guess it's just a comfort thing. He's always surrounded by new things. New people. Gotta have something constant, right?" Clara mulled that over. A comfort thing. That made some sense. It wasn't a family heirloom, nor did it seem to be linked to any major milestone in his career. It wasn't engraved or made of a rare material. It was just a glass. One afternoon, Clara was tasked with organizing some new albums in Elvis's private music room. It was a sanctuary filled with records from floor to ceiling, a plush armchair in the corner, and a powerful stereo system. Elvis was often there, lost in music, away from the constant demands of his fame. As she worked, she heard soft music drifting from the living room, a gospel hymn, not one of Elvis's usual upbeat numbers. A moment later, a maid Mary approached her. "Clara, could you take this in for Mr. Presley?" Mary asked, holding out a tall, frosty glass filled with Pepsi. It was, of course, the glass. Clara nodded, her heart giving a little flutter of anticipation. She carried the glass carefully, the cold condensation clinging to her fingers. The living room was quiet, the only sound the mournful, beautiful strains of the gospel. Elvis was sitting in his favorite armchair facing the grand piano. He wasn't playing, just listening. His eyes were closed, his head tilted back slightly. He looked peaceful and tired. He reached out his fingers, wrapping around the cool glass. He didn't take a sip immediately. Instead, he just held at his thumb, tracing the subtle fluting. For a long moment, he just sat there holding the glass, listening to the music. His gaze seemed to unfocus, looking past Clara, past the walls of the room as if seeing something only he could perceive. There was a profound stillness about him, a quality she hadn't witnessed before. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was more like a deep, quiet yearning. A memory, perhaps. Clara felt a wave of empathy. This wasn't just a celebrity with an odd habit. This was a man, and that glass clearly meant something deeply personal to him. It was a tether, perhaps, to a time or a feeling that was precious. Finally, he took a slow, deliberate sip. His eyes closed again for a moment, and a soft sigh escaped him. A sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, yet also a hint of quiet contentment. "Thank you, Clara," he murmured, his voice low, a little husky. "This is perfect. Clara didn't respond, just stood there, watching him. She noticed his grip on the glass. It wasn't casual. It was almost reverent, as if the glass itself were fragile, or as if it held something precious within its sturdy walls. Later that day, Colonel Parker, Elvis's notoriously shrewd manager, burst into the office, barking orders about an upcoming concert. He saw one of the specific glasses on a table forgotten after Elvis had finished his drink. Dagnabbit, why can't he use a regular glass like everyone else? Parker grumbled, picking it up and examining it with a look of distaste. Such a fuss over nothing. We're losing valuable minutes fussing over these ridiculous things. It's bad for the image, too. People will think he's some kind of diva. He set the glass down with a thud, dismissively. Clara flinched to her. It wasn't... nothing. Colonel's casual dismissal only solidified her feeling that there was a hidden story. If even his closest manager didn't understand or didn't care to, then it truly was a private world. Elvis retreated to, with that glass. She looked at the glass, now empty and waiting to be cleaned. It didn't look ridiculous. It looked soulful. And Clara knew with a certainty that hummed in her bones that she had to find out why she wasn't just observing a quirk anymore. She felt compelled to understand. It felt important, not just for Elvis, but for her own understanding of what truly mattered in life. Beyond the dazzling lights and roar of the crowds, Clara couldn't shake the image of Elvis lost in thought, holding that plain glass. It gnawed at her, a quiet itch of curiosity that begged to be scratched. The Colonel's dismissive attitude only fueled her determination. She wanted to know the why. She started subtly, when she had a moment, usually during her lunch break or after hours when the main hustle of Graceland had died down. She would venture out. Her first stop was a few local antique shops and second-hand stores in Memphis. She didn't want to draw attention or make anyone think she was on an official mission. She just browsed, trying to make her search for a specific type of glass seem like a casual hobby. She described it to a shop owner once, trying to be vague. You know, a sturdy, clear glass, maybe a little fluted, the kind you might have seen in a diner back in the day. The owner, a kindly old woman with spectacles perched on her nose, tilted her head. "Oh, honey, sounds like an old Libby Safage or maybe a Duralex Picardy, but most likely a local manufacturer's copy. Hard to find a specific one now, though most of them broke or got replaced with new patterns." Clara nodded, observing the information. Libby Safage. That gave her a name, a starting point. She spent hours sifting through dusty shelves, her fingers brushing against countless glass items, vases, tumblers, delicate teacups, but none of them were the glass. They were similar, yes, but not quite right. The weight, the subtle curve, the feel of the rim, it was distinct. She had picked it up enough times in the Graceland kitchen to know its precise characteristics. Her search widened. She visited older parts of Memphis, areas that hadn't been gentrified, where time seemed to move a little slower. She walked down streets with faded storefronts, some boarded up, others still clinging to business. She even popped into a few rundown diners, ordering a Pepsi, hoping to see it served in the familiar glass. But even in these places, the glassware had been updated, sleek and modern. One afternoon, she was walking past a small, unassuming junk shop tucked away on a side street she'd never noticed before. The window display was a jumble of forgotten treasures, rusty tools, cracked porcelain dolls, yellowed books. Something compelled her to go in. The shop was crammed, smelling of dust and forgotten memories. An elderly man sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper, his spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up as she entered, offering a quiet nod. Clara began to browse, her eyes scanning the shelves, and then there it was. Tucked away behind a stack of chipped plates, almost hidden, was a set of 4 glasses. They were dusty but unmistakable. The subtle fluting, the sturdy base, the feel of the rim, it was them, the glasses. Her heart gave a little jolt. She picked one up. It felt right, perfectly weighted, familiar. In her hand, it even had a tiny, almost imperceptible bubble flaw near the rim. Something she remembered noticing on one of the Graceland glasses. It was like finding a missing piece of a puzzle she hadn't even fully understood yet. "Excuse me," she said, walking over to the counter, holding the glass carefully. "How much for these?" The old man peered at them over his newspaper. "Ah, those just some old tumblers. You can have the set for $1. $1? Clara could hardly believe it. She quickly handed him the money, trying to keep her excitement in check. "Thank you so much. You're welcome, miss," he said, his eyes twinkling. "They got a good story behind them, I reckon. Everything in here does. Folks used to buy these by the dozen for their diners and their homes. Back in the day, good, honest glasses." Clara smiled, a genuine wide smile that stretched her cheeks. She had found them. Not just a glass, but a set identical to the ones at Graceland. This was more than just a lucky find. It felt like a breakthrough. She carefully wrapped the glasses in newspaper and tucked them into her bag. As she walked out of the shop, the sun seemed to shine a little brighter. She didn't know what the story was yet, but now she had a tangible link. These glasses, she realized, were probably from the same manufacturing batch, likely bought at the same time and place as the ones Elvis used. Her thoughts raced. Where might they have come from? What kind of diner, what kind of home would have had these? And how would Elvis have come across them? Was it simply a comfort thing, as the roadie said? Or was there something more profound tied to their origin? She held one of the glasses out of her bag for a moment, just looking at it. It was so simple, so unassuming. And yet for Elvis, it held something immense. Clara felt a surge of hope. She was closer, she knew it. The mystery was slowly, carefully starting to unfold. And she felt a growing sense of anticipation, a quiet thrill at the prospect of truly understanding the man behind the legend. Clara debated what to do with the glasses she'd found. Bringing them to Graceland would be too obvious, too forward. She needed to know more first. Her next step, she decided, was to retrace her steps to the junk shop and talk to the old man who ran it. He seemed to know things, to have a memory for the everyday items that passed through his hands. The next day, on her lunch break, she returned to the dusty shop. The old man, whose name she now knew was Silas, was still behind the counter reading his newspaper. "Hello again, Mr. Silas," Clara said, trying to be friendly but not pushy. He looked up, a slight smile on his weathered face. "Well, if it isn't the young lady who appreciates a good honest glass, found a use for them already?" Clara chuckled. "Not yet, but they reminded me of some other glasses I've seen, and I was just curious, do you remember where these types of glasses usually came from? Like which diners or stores bought them?" Silas leaned back in his creaky chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. These? "Oh, they were common. Most of the diners around here had 'em back in the day. Sturdy didn't break easy. We sold a lot of them to a place called Rosie's Diner. It was just a few blocks from here, down on Sycamore Street. Closed down years ago, of course." "Rosie's Diner," she repeated, trying to commit the name to memory. "What was it like?" "Just a simple place," Silas mused, a faraway look in his eyes. Pieces were starting to fit slowly, tantalizingly. "Did you know any of those musicians personally?" Clara asked, trying to keep her voice even. Silas chuckled. "Oh, some of them. There was one young fellow, skinny as a rail, but full of fire. Always had a guitar, slung over his backwards or something to pawn. When times were real hard, he used to hang around Rosie's a lot, too." Clara held her breath. "Do you remember his name?" Silas tapped his chin, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Let me see, hard to forget a name like that. Sounded like a king even back then." "Elvis, yeah, that was it. Elvis Presley." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. "Bingo. He used to drink Pepsi at Rosie's Diner," she prompted, urging Silas to continue. "Oh, all the time," Silas confirmed, nodding. "Especially on hot days. Rosie, she was good to him. Joe, he was a sweet boy, just down on his luck sometimes. When he was real broke, she'd slip him a free Pepsi's, always in one of those glasses, too. Said they were her favorites, good and honest. just like the people she liked. Yep, she knew he had talent. She just had a way of seeing it in people. Told him once, "You just keep singing, boy. You got a gift. And don't you ever forget where you came from, no matter how high you fly." Something like that. She was a wise woman. Rosie was. Clara pictured it. A young, unknown Elvis, struggling but full of dreams, sitting in a simple diner being offered a small kindness by a generous woman. And that kindness, that belief, was delivered in that specific glass. So these glasses, they were Rosie's favorites. Clara asked, picking up one of the glasses she'd bought and examining it again. "That's right," Silas affirmed. She used to say. They had good juju, said they were the kind of glass that held good memories. Silly, maybe, but Rosie had her ways. It wasn't about the taste or a superstition. It was about memory. It was about gratitude. It was about a promise. She thanked Silas profusely, her mind reeling with the implications. She had found the story, the quiet, profound story behind the simple glass. It wasn't a quirk. It was a testament. A silent daily ritual of remembrance for a simple act of kindness that had meant the world to a struggling young man who would become a legend. The weight of that knowledge, the simple beauty of it, settled in her heart. She couldn't wait to go back to Graceland. But this time, her perspective had fundamentally shifted. Armed with the knowledge from Silas, Clara returned to Graceland, her steps lighter, her mind buzzing. The mansion still hummed with its usual energy, but now, every time she saw Elvis or glanced at one of the ubiquitous Pepsi glasses, a new layer of meaning revealed itself. She watched him at dinner that evening. He was in a good mood, laughing with his cousins, telling stories from a recent tour. When a Pepsi was poured for him, it was naturally in the glass. Took a sip, then set it down, continuing his lively conversation. But Clara noticed a subtle gesture. He made a brief, almost unconscious touch to the rim of the glass with his thumb. A microsecond pause before he launched back into his story. It was a gesture of quiet acknowledgement, a fleeting moment of connection to something beyond the present company. It wasn't a superstition, not in the way Colonel Parker had implied. It was a ritual of remembrance. A daily private nod to his humble beginnings and the kindness that had helped him on his way. The oddness wasn't its existence, but its profound, silent significance in such a public life. Clara spent the next few days piecing together the narrative in her mind. Rosie, the kind diner, owner of the free Pepsis, the encouragement, the belief. Don't ever forget where you came from, no matter how high you fly. That simple phrase, delivered with a glass of Pepsi, had clearly resonated deeply with a young Elvis. She thought about how easy it would be for someone like Elvis to lose touch with his past. Surrounded by fame, wealth, and adoration, the simple acts of kindness from his formative years could easily be forgotten. Dismissed as trivial, but he hadn't forgotten. He had chosen to carry it with him daily, in the most unassuming way possible. The heavy, sturdy glass wasn't just a vessel for his drink. It was a vessel for his memories, his gratitude, and his humility. It was a constant reminder of the little people and the simple acts that had paved his path to superstardom. It kept him rounded. It kept him real. Clara felt a profound respect for Elvis. It wasn't just the music or the charisma or the fame that made him special. It was this quiet, unwavering commitment to his roots, this deep sense of gratitude that made him more human, more relatable than any interview or performance ever could. She still had the 4 glasses she'd bought from Silas. They sat on her bedside table in her small apartment, wrapped in newspaper, a tangible link to the story she had uncovered. She wondered if Elvis knew how many people simply saw his preference as an eccentricity, a celebrity whim. She wondered if he ever wished someone truly understood. One afternoon, she was sorting through some old fan mail that had been held for years, part of a massive backlog. Among them, she found a small, crinkled envelope, addressed in a shaky, old-fashioned handwriting. The postmark was, from years ago, felt different from the others, less like fan mail, more personal. She opened it carefully. Inside was a simple handwritten note. No formal address, just a "Dear Elvis." And signed, "Your friend, Rosie." The note was short-faded. It spoke of simple things, the weather, the people in town, but there was one line that made Clara's breath catch. "I hear you're doing real good. Son, that makes my heart swell. Just remember what I always told you. Keep singing, and never forget who you are. And don't you worry, I still got those good old glasses." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. It was even more poignant than Silas's retelling. Rosie, still there, still believing, still offering that simple comfort, and the mention of the glasses. It was confirmation direct, undeniable confirmation. She carefully folded the letter and put it back in its envelope. This was not something she could just put in the general fan mail pile. This was sacred. This was a piece of Elvis's heart. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't keep this to herself, not the letter and not the understanding she had gained. But how to approach the king with such a personal, intimate discovery? She didn't want to seem intrusive or like she was prying. She wanted to share, to show him that someone saw beyond the glitz and the glamour and truly understood. The task felt daunting, but also incredibly important. She was just a junior assistant, and he was Elvis Presley. But something told her deep in her gut that this was something he needed to hear. He needed to know that the quiet, profound meaning behind his daily ritual hadn't gone unnoticed by someone who genuinely cared. The old letter from Rosie burned a hole in Clara's pocket. She couldn't just hand it to Elvis like another piece of mail. This was different. This was a direct link to the very core of his silent ritual, the proof of the heartwarming story she had uncovered. She spent a few days simply observing, waiting for the right moment. Elvis was constantly surrounded by family, by his Memphis mafia, by business associates. Finding a quiet, private moment seemed impossible. Then, one rainy afternoon, fate intervened. Elvis had been holed up in the music room working on new arrangements for an upcoming recording session. Clara was tasked with bringing him a fresh Pepsi, of course, in the glass. She knocked softly on the music room door. "Mr. Presley, your Pepsi." "Come on in, Clara," he called out, his voice slightly hoarse from singing. She entered to find him slumped in his armchair, a guitar resting beside him, sheet music scattered on the floor. He looked weary, lines of fatigue etched around his eyes, but also a profound concentration. The room was quiet, save for the soft patter of rain against the window panes. He reached for the glass, his fingers curling around it, not even looking at her directly, his mind still clearly caught in the music. He took a long drink, the sound of the fizz the only thing breaking the silence. Clara hesitated. This was it, the moment. "Mr. Presley," she began, her voice a little shaky, I found something from your old fan mail. It's very old, but it seemed important." He lowered the glass, his eyes blue and deep. Meeting hers, he looked surprised, perhaps a little guarded. "Oh, what is it, honey?" Clara pulled the faded envelope from her pocket. "It's from Rosie. Rosie's Diner?" The name seemed to hang in the air, transforming the atmosphere. In the room, Elvis's posture stiffened. His eyes widened. Slightly, a flicker of something raw and vulnerable passing through them. He extended a hand slowly, almost reverently. For the letter, Clara placed it gently in his palm. He looked at the familiar shaky handwriting, his thumb tracing the name Rosie. He opened the envelope, pulling out the fragile note. As he read, Clara watched him. His expression shifted from surprise to recognition, then to a profound tenderness. A small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his hand as he held the paper. His gaze lingered on the line about the good old glasses. A genuine, soft smile touched his lips, a smile she hadn't seen before. Not the performing smile, but something deeply personal and heartfelt. When he finished reading, he didn't speak for a long moment. He just sat there holding the letter, the Pepsi glass still in his other hand. His eyes, now slightly misted, were fixed on some distant point, lost in memory. Rosie, he murmured, his voice barely a whisper thick with emotion. I haven't heard from her in years. She moved last I didn't know. She was still sending notes. She passed away a few years ago, Mr. Presley, Clara said softly, remembering something Silas had mentioned. I spoke to a man, Silas, who ran a junk shop near where Rosie's diner used to be. He remembered her, and he remembered you. Elvis turned his gaze back to Clara, a mixture of wonder and curiosity in his eyes. You went looking? You found out? Clara nodded. I saw how much the glass meant to you. Everyone just called it a quirk, but I knew it had to be more. I felt like there was a story there, a beautiful one. She gestured vaguely. About a kind woman, a struggling young man, and a simple glass of Pepsi. A slow, understanding nod from Elvis. He looked down at the glass he held, then back at the letter, and then finally at Clara. There was no anger, no annoyance that she had delved into his personal history, only a deep, quiet gratitude. She was an angel, Rosie was, Elvis said, his voice raspy. Before anyone knew my name, before anyone cared, she saw something in me. She always said, "You're going to be something special, son, just you wait." And she'd give me a Pepsi when I couldn't afford it. Always in one of these. Said these were her dream glasses, strong and clear, just like a true heart. He paused, a faint, sad smile playing on his lips. I'd promised I'd never forget the simple kindnesses, never forget where I came from. Every time I drink from this glass, it's like she's right there, reminding me to stay humble, reminding me of the struggle and the dreams and the people who believed in me when nobody else did. The room was silent again, save for the rain. Clara felt a profound connection to this man. Not the icon, but the human being. His vulnerability, his humility, his unwavering loyalty to a simple promise made years ago. It was deeply moving. The odd reason for the glass wasn't odd at all. It was profoundly, beautifully human. Elvis looked at Clara, his blue eyes filled with a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and a hint of something unburdened. You really went and found all that out, didn't you? He said, a soft chuckle escaping him. Most folks just think I'm particular, or maybe a little crazy. Clara smiled gently. I just thought it was a beautiful story, Mr. Presley, and it felt like it deserved to be understood. He set the old letter carefully on his lap, still holding the Pepsi glass. It is, he agreed, his voice growing softer, almost reflective. It really is, Rosie. She saw me, not the flashy boy trying to make a buck, but the boy who just loved to sing. She nourished that with a free Pepsi, a kind word, and a belief that was stronger than anything I felt sometimes. He shifted in his chair, leaning forward slightly, as if sharing a deep secret. It was the only thing I took with me from Memphis that truly mattered besides my guitar. It was my anchor. Clara listened, captivated. The odd reason was unfolding with an unexpected depth. It wasn't just a memory. It was a living promise, a daily recommitment to the values that Rosie had instilled in him. We always kept in touch for years. She'd send little notes, just like this one. Every now and then, simple things. Always reminding me to stay true to myself, he sighed, a long, wistful sound. After a while, the letters stopped. I tried to find her, but she'd moved on, like Silas said. I worried about her, but I never stopped drinking my Pepsi in her kind of glass. It was my way of keeping her spirit alive. Keeping that promise alive. This was the Elvis few people saw. The man beneath the jumpsuit, the king, the legend. He was just a man who deeply valued kindness and held onto his roots with unwavering loyalty. His oddity was in fact his greatest strength. It's not odd at all, Mr. Presley, Clara said, her voice soft but firm. It's beautiful. It's a testament to who you are and to the power of a simple, genuine connection. He looked at her, then truly looked at her, and a warmth spread across his face that had nothing to do with stage light. "You see that, don't you, Clara?" he said, a quiet awe in his voice. "You really see it. Most people, they just don't get it. They think it's some kind of celebrity whim, but it's not. It's the weight of a promise and the warmth of a memory." He picked up the old letter again. "Thank you for finding this, Clara. Thank you for caring enough to look." He folded it gently and slipped it into his shirt pocket close to his heart. "And thank you for understanding." The rainy afternoon outside seemed to grow brighter, the air in the music room filled with a silent understanding. Clara felt a unique connection, forged in that moment, a bond built not on fame or phantom, but on shared humanity and a deep appreciation for the quiet, enduring power of kindness. She had not only uncovered Elvis's secret, but she had also discovered a profound truth about the man himself. The conversation in the music room had changed everything. Clara felt a new lightness in her step as she moved through Graceland, a deeper connection to the place and the man at its heart. She no longer saw Elvis as just the superstar, but as a complex, humble individual carrying the quiet weight of a cherished promise. Elvis, in turn, seemed to be subtly different with her. There was an unspoken understanding between them. He would often offer her a brief knowing glance when someone served him his Pepsi in the special glass, a tiny, almost imperceptible nod that conveyed their shared secret. He even started calling her Clara Belle sometimes, a warm, familial nickname that made her feel truly part of the inner circle, not just an assistant. One evening, after the day's flurry of activity had settled down, Elvis called Clara into his study. He was sitting at his large, ornate desk, surrounded by papers and photographs. "Clara Belle," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "Come on in. Got something for you." She sat down, a little nervous, wondering what it could be. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, carefully wrapped package. "I've been thinking about what you did. Finding out about Rosie," he began, his voice soft. "It meant a lot to me, more than you know. To know someone cared enough to look, to understand. It's a rare thing in this life." He pushed the package across the desk, towards her. "This is for you." Clara unwrapped it carefully. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, were 2 glasses. They were identical to the ones Elvis used, sturdy and fluted with that unmistakable weighty feel. They were the ones she had bought from Silas, the ones she had left wrapped in newspaper in her own apartment. She recognized a tiny bubble flaw near the rim of one of them. Her breath hitched. She looked up at Elvis, surprised. "Mr. Presley, these are." "The ones you bought from Silas," he finished, a knowing smile on his face. He remembered Rosie, too. Said she was one of a kind. Clara felt a blush creep up her neck. She hadn't realized Silas knew who she was, or that he would call Elvis, but the surprise quickly melted into warmth. "I didn't mean to pry," she stammered, feeling a little embarrassed. "Don't you dare apologize, Clara Belle," Elvis said, his voice firm but kind. "You didn't pry. You understood, and that's a gift. Those glasses, the ones you found there from the same batch that Rosie had, probably even bought from the same wholesale supplier. They're a part of that story, too. A little reminder of a simple kindness that changed a life." He leaned back in his chair. "You know I've got plenty of these now. I've always made sure to keep a stock. But these are special. They were found by someone who cared, who understood the why." Clara held the glasses in her hands, their solid weight feeling immensely comforting. It was more than just a gift. It was a profound gesture of trust, a sharing of a deeply personal piece of his life. "Thank you, Mr. Presley," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. They mean a lot." "Good," he said, a genuine warmth in his gaze. "They should, every time you drink from them, remember that it's the simple things, the quiet kindnesses, that often make the biggest difference. That's what Rosie taught me." Picked up one of his own special Pepsi glasses from his desk, still half full. He raised it slightly. A silent toast. Clara, holding the 2 new old glasses, met his gaze. It was a shared moment. A bond formed over an ordinary object that held extraordinary meaning. From that day forward, The bond between Elvis and Clara was different. She continued her duties, but now with a deeper understanding and a quiet respect. She no longer felt like just an assistant. She felt like a confidant, privy to a piece of Elvis's soul that few others were. The odd reason for his Pepsi glass was no longer a mystery, but a beautiful, heartwarming truth that resonated deep within her own heart. She had come to Graceland to work for a legend, but she was leaving with a profound lesson about humanity, humility, and the enduring power of kindness. The secret of the Pepsi glass became a quiet, shared understanding between Elvis and Clara. It wasn't something they spoke of often, but it was always there, a silent undercurrent that solidified their unique bond. Clara noticed how Elvis would sometimes catch her eye when one of the other staff members, oblivious, made a passing comment about his odd little preference. A small, knowing smile would pass between them, a silent agreement that they both knew the deeper truth. Clara kept the glasses Elvis had given her on her own kitchen counter at home. She found herself using them, not just for Pepsi, but for water or juice. Each time she held one, she felt that solid, comforting weight, and she was reminded not just of Rosie and Elvis, but of the larger lesson about kindness and humility. She saw Elvis now through a different lens. He was still the magnificent performer, the king of rock and roll, but she also saw the quiet man who cherished a memory, who remembered every kindness shown to him. It made his larger-than-life persona even more compelling, more real. One evening, Elvis was feeling a little down. He'd had a particularly grueling week of recording and rehearsals, and the pressure of public appearances was taking its toll. Clara found him in the living room, slumped in his favorite chair, the ever-present Pepsi glass in his hand, though it was empty now. He looked tired, almost deflated. Clara asked gently, approaching him with a fresh, cold Pepsi she just poured in the glass. He looked up, a weary smile touching his lips. "You know it, Clarabelle. Sometimes it feels like the whole world is just pulling at you, wanting a piece." He took the glass from her, taking a long, refreshing drink. "Thanks, honey. Needed that," he sighed, the weight of his fame pressing down on him. "You know, people sometimes ask me how I stay sane, how I don't get completely lost in all this." He gestured vaguely around the lavish room, the mansion, the life of a superstar. "And I always tell them it's my family, my music, my faith. And that's all true, of course, but there's something else too." He looked down at the glass in his hand, turning it slowly. "It's a constant reminder that none of this, none of the screaming crowds, the big houses, the fancy cars, none of it happened in a vacuum. It started with a kind woman and a free Pepsi when I had nothing. It reminds me to appreciate every single step, every single person who lifted me up along the way. Keeps me from forgetting that I'm still just Elvis, the boy from Tupelo, the boy who just loved to sing, and that Clarabelle. That's how I stay sane. It's my quiet anchor." In a very loud world, Clara listened, her heart swelling with understanding. This was the core of it. The profound humility that this simple glass embodied for him. It wasn't just a promise to Rosie. It was a promise to himself, to his own identity. "That's a beautiful way to live, Mr. Presley," she said softly. "To always remember where you came from." He nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It's easy to get caught up, you know, to believe your own hype. But then I pick up this glass and I remember Rosie and all the folks like her who believed in me, who gave me a hand up when I needed it most, and it brings me right back down to earth, reminds me what truly matters." He finished his Pepsi, the ice clinking softly at the bottom of the glass. He set it down, a renewed sense of peace settling over him. The weariness in his eyes seemed to lessen, replaced by a quiet strength. Clara realized then that the odd reason wasn't just a heartwarming memory. It was a daily practice of gratitude, a profound tool for self-awareness, an inner peace amidst the chaos of unprecedented fame. It was Elvis's secret to staying grounded, to remaining true to himself. And in a world that constantly sought to define him, this simple glass was his quiet, powerful declaration of who he truly was. And Clara, by understanding it, had been given a glimpse into the heart of a king who never forgot his humble beginnings. Years passed. Graceland continued to be a whirlwind of activity, a vibrant hub of music and family. Clara remained a part of the household, her role expanding, but her quiet understanding of Elvis and his rituals deepened. Pepsi glass, always present, remained a silent testament to the man she had come to know. She observed how Elvis continued his daily ritual, never wavering. New staff members would come and go, some still finding the habit peculiar, others accepting it as just Elvis. But Clara knew the truth, and that knowledge fostered a quiet respect that radiated from her. Sometimes Elvis would share other small, personal anecdotes. With her stories of his childhood in Tupelo, of his early struggles, of the people who had impacted him along the way. He didn't share these widely, but with Clara there was an open honesty, a trust born from her quiet understanding of the Pepsi glass. She became not just an employee, but a valued confidant, a listener who truly saw him. The glasses themselves, the ones Elvis used daily, showed the gentle wear of time. A few had chipped, and a couple had broken over the years despite the careful handling. Each time one was lost, Elvis would show a moment of quiet sadness, a brief, wistful sigh, but he always had others kept carefully stocked, reminding him of Rosie's generous spirit. One day Clara found herself in town browsing in an antique store, not actively searching for anything in particular. She paused by a shelf of old glassware, and her eyes landed on a familiar shape, a plain, sturdy glass, slightly fluted towards the bottom. It was a glass identical to the ones at Graceland, identical to the one Silas had sold her years ago. It felt like finding an old friend. She picked it up. It was pristine, almost new-looking for its age. She bought it not because Elvis needed another, but because it felt important to simply have it, a tangible piece of a story she now held so dear back at Graceland. She showed it, his fingers tracing its familiar contours. "Well, look at that, Clara Belle," he said, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "A new old friend. Rosie would have liked this one." He held it up to the light, then placed it carefully with the others on the kitchen shelf, a silent addition to the collection that anchored his soul. Years eventually turned into decades. The world changed, music changed, and Elvis's life continued its extraordinary, demanding trajectory. Through it all, the Pepsi glass remained, his constant. It was more than a habit. It was a living prayer, a silent tribute to gratitude and humility, a daily recommitment to the simple values that had shaped him. Clara eventually moved on from her role at Graceland, but her connection to the Presley family and her deep respect for Elvis never faded. She carried the story of the Pepsi glass with her, a personal, profound lesson she shared with no one else, but lived by every day. Whenever she saw a picture of Elvis, saw him on television, or heard one of his songs, she didn't just see the king. She saw the man who never forgot the small acts of kindness, the man who held onto his roots with quiet dignity, the man who found strength and solace in a simple, sturdy glass of Pepsi. The odd reason for Elvis Presley's specific Pepsi glass wasn't odd at all. It was the most heartwarming reason imaginable. It was a testament to the power of human connection, the enduring value of humility, and the quiet, unwavering promise of a king who never forgot the simple kindnesses that shaped him. And that Clara knew was a legacy more powerful than any hit song or sold-out concert. It was the unseen legacy of the king's heart,